Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Landlord Shop Talk in Alberta Landlord Community. So here's what's happening tonight. MacKenzie got hit with a kid bug, so his kids brought something home to him, and he's gone down hard tonight. He tried, and he called me late. And he says, "I'll try to do it," and then I just got off the phone before we went live. He says, "I can't do it. I got to go to bed." So he's out cold, or going to be shortly. So I'm going to give it a go here myself. We had Darren King from our local insurance company here in Ponoka. He's a friend of mine, and he'll tell us a little more about him. And he uh, sells insurance for all different aspects. He also deals with the claims when the clients come in. So we're going to talk to him about that. And we had Courtney from New Era Insurance. Now, unfortunately, something happened with Courtney, and she wasn't able to make it tonight. She had a family emergency. So, the show, we lost 50% of our guests, I guess, if you'll say. So I even reached out to Uncle Bill Biko, but unfortunately, he's a little bit busy too. So tonight we'll talk about insurances, we'll talk about claims, we'll talk about things that you should or shouldn't do, and we'll talk about tenant insurance. We're going to try and hit everything here tonight. I encourage you to put your questions up on the show so we can go live. Some of you followed my video earlier today and you put some questions on there, so I'll read those off. And so go grab a drink while we do our intro here, and whether it's coffee, tea, or others, and sit back and let's try to educate our community from a community-based approach. See you shortly, everybody. Well, good evening. Hi, Darren. Thanks for joining us all the way from Ponoka. You're just across the river from me, are you?
Yeah, you bet. Nice to be here, Chris. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no, it's always a pleasure. It's great to reach out to people that we know and we trust. Darren is a part of our page. I invited him many years ago to be a part of it because of his insurance background, and lots of people have questions. So we're going to take him to task here a little bit tonight and see what we can educate everybody on. So, Darren, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you have on the go, and your locations, your background, your history. Give us a little curriculum vitae there. Tell us about it.
Yeah, you bet. Well, like you said, I'm Darren King, and I've been in the insurance business as a broker almost 20 years now. So I've definitely seen a policy or two and seen a claim or two, and I've seen some go sideways, and I've seen some kind of get back on track. And I work now for a local insurance office called Sims Insurance, and we have two locations, Lacombe and Rocky Mountain House now, and been there since for about 8 years now. And yeah, I kind of do a little bit of everything, a little bit of commercial insurance, a little bit of personal insurance. So kind of got my hands in both pots, I guess. So doing just selling policies and servicing clients, and it's been the last few years. The start of the pandemic, things have been really busy for us actually in the insurance world. So if your current provider is not getting back to you in the time that you're hoping, or so, maybe just give them that little extra time, because we all could use it right now.
Oh, nice. So, how did you get involved in insurance, Darren? What got you started in that?
Yeah, well, I answered an ad in the Edmonton Journal for the cooperators. They were looking for summer students to kind of just go from one office to the next during the summer to do vacation relief. And I went in and had an interview, and they kind of gave me the job kind of the next day. And so that's how I got my start working in Edmonton at the Cooperators.
Great. So now you run the office here in Darrington, Ponoka with me, where I live. And
Yeah.
So you run the office here, do you?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that your own brokerage?
No, I'm still a broker employee, but we're pretty independent as a brokerage, so we don't have any ties to any specific insurance company, and we can place business where we see fit best to the client, and we're not tied down to any set volumes or anything.
Okay, great. All right, well, we're just killing a few minutes here waiting for our numbers to get up, and so we got quite a few viewers here. So Darren, if we can cut right into it, I'm going to go after our first question. This one comes from, well, I'll just remind everybody, first off, if you have a question about insurance or a question about what we're talking about right off the hand, just by all means, put it in, and when it pops up, I'll throw it up on the screen here, and we can continue to discuss it. So first question up tonight is from Bill Beatle. He says, why does a landlord need insurance? And if a landlord has it, why does a landlord need insurance if a tenant has it and vice versa? So if a tenant has insurance, why does a landlord need it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's a good question. And I wouldn't say necessarily like a common misconception, but there are different aspects to the insurance policy. So we're going to have what the landlord owns and what the tenant owns. And the landlord is going to have the house, right? And they're going to have maybe some contents, a fridge, a stove, that kind of stuff, lawnmower maybe, right? And then we're going to have the tenants. So they're going to have their contents. So we're talking fridges, or sorry, not the fridge, the food, the contents, the tables, chairs, clothing, right? All the stuff that they own. So those actually need two separate policies, because if there were to be a loss, say a fire, they would have paid the landlord for the dwelling and the tenant would be paid for their contents inside.
Okay, so if a tenant started a fire and the tenant had insurance, what happens?
Well, the first policy to pay is the primary property policy. So the landlord's policy is going to pay first to get say it's just like a little, like a kitchen and there's a little bit of smoke, right? And it's say maybe $5,000, right? So the landlord's policy is going to pay to have it cleaned, place whatever drywall they need, and maybe the hood, right? Then what they'll do is they'll go after the landlord's insurance company will go after the tenant for damages that they were negligent in causing. So for example, starting the fire, maybe they left the pot on and an oil caught, right? So they would get their money back from the tenant's liability policy.
Okay, is a good analogy of this, everybody knows about car insurance. So is a good analogy why you should have a collision on your car. So if you get in an accident and somebody hits you, and there's a collision and you get hit, your policy, my policy, let's say you hit me and I have a collision on my car. So my policy will take care of me because I have a collision.
That's right.
And then my insurance company will go after your insurance to get you to pay. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because if I hit you, right, and you're waiting for me, like I technically have 2 years to submit that claim. So if you're waiting for me to do it, like it could take forever. So if you pay for the insurance, then you have the collision, and then that's where you can make the claim on yours. They get it fixed, and then your insurance company has the headache of trying to deal with me or then my insurance company.
Okay, so on the other side of it, let's say I don't have collision, I just have PLPD liabilities. Then what happens there? Even though you're at fault, it's up to you to submit the claim, and if you're not submitting it, then I'm out. I can't submit it to your insurance company.
Yeah, and maybe like you can. It depends on who you're insured with and who your broker is or your service provider. They might write a demand letter to that other insurance company. But if you don't really have that information, it's hard to get it. So even just for the viewers, if you get into a car accident, like take a picture of the pink card and the registration and the driver's license. You need those three things.
Right. So go back to the house now. I just
Yeah.
wanted to bring that as an analogy because people are way more familiar a lot of times than
Sure.
than that. So go back to the house now. So the landlord has insurance. The house, the tenant causes a fire, burns on, or you're boiler cooking with grease and it caught fire.
Yep.
So my insurance will pay for it. The tenant has its own tenant insurance, so then my insurance company will go after the tenant's insurance. Correct?
Yeah, you bet, for sure.
And well, under the tenant insurance, what covers it? What makes it so that they have insurance for that damage?
So they would have then liability insurance. So the tenant's policy is built up of two sections. There's the contents, and then there's the liability. So the liability covers them for any damages or bodily injury that they cause to third parties or third person, like a person, right?
Right.
So if they cause a fire to the landlord's house that they're responsible for, then that's where they would get the payout for that, being under liability insurance.
And if your tenant lets it lapse, then your insurance is going to be showing as a claim against you, right? And against me, and that's
they won't have any subrogation. They won't be able to go back. Like they could go into small claims court and submit that way, but because the chances of them actually getting the money back that way are small to slim, that they won't spend the money to do that. But if they have it from an insurance company, they basically just send the paperwork over, and in a few months they get a check back. So
okay, good. All right, let's move on to see if I got any questions that are popping up here. Nothing yet. Come on, folks, you got to have some questions here. Let's go to Lewis I'm just gonna say Lewis sent in a question here on the page. He says, what can landlords do to be notified when a tenant cancels their insurance? Is there something out there that he says there's only a few insurance companies that can do it, but what can a landlord do to make sure their tenant continues to be insured? Is there any tricks to the trade?
As far as tricks to the trade, asking the tenant for a copy of the policy every year is the best bet. I do know that there's another provider out there, New Era, that does have a system where the landlord gets notified if the policy's canceled, but that's one of many that are one of the only ones out there. Most times the landlord or the tenant is going to look either for the cheapest one or the one that's kind of down the street, the easiest access, and the chance of getting notified by them on a cancellation is not going to happen. They're just not designed that way.
Is there any way that a person can, when I sign up my tenant and they do a lease, can I have a clause in my lease that says that I'm allowed to access their insurance agent and to find out if their insurance is valid? Does that hold any weight?
Probably not. I mean, we would run into privacy issues with that. You'd have to send the lease. Then we would probably have to ask the tenant if that was okay. It would be. I wouldn't see that really being effective, unfortunately.
Right. So if my tenant came in and I had a separate piece of paper says permitting me to do random checks twice a year or every 6 months to ensure their insurance is in place, I guess the opposite is just I should just tell my tenant, send me a letter. I want to know that it's in place, right?
Yeah, like if you came in with that letter and we verified with the tenant, right, then yeah, we would definitely tell you the information, because then the tenant's asking us to do that. So like we verify in like insurance for various other, like for contractors and companies, right? But they give us permission to talk to whoever they're working for, right? So asking for them to give you permission for a third party is kind of, I guess, cart before the horse kind of thing. Not to say it can't happen, but we'd probably want to just verify with the tenant first.
Okay, so simply I could have them sign it, bring it into you and say, yeah, I want to know it. And if their insurance isn't good, you'll phone them up, say your landlord's in here questioning it. Can I tell them? They say yes, and then we can go from there. Okay. Well, there's maybe a little angle to that. Let's see, we have a question on the page. I just want to see who it's from. It's from Kelly, and I'll put it up here. And she says, if you want to have a look here, says, if a tenant is not considered liable at fault for the damage, they would not have to pay. In my case, a tenant's car caught fire in the driveway. They were not considered at fault for the car fire. We had to claim for the damages. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's why we have property insurance, because sometimes there's no fault to it. It just happens. It's the same as if there's a hail or a tornado. It just damages the property, and we fix it through the insurance. And sometimes people are at fault for it, and sometimes they're not. Whether they have granted access to a property, if they're not at fault for it, if they're not liable, you have to be negligent for your liability to insurance to pay. And if it's like they go by that reasonable person premise, right? So if they did everything reasonable to not have their car light on fire that night, then they're probably not going to be responsible for it.
Right, makes sense. It's like just something that happens. There's a short. It's working its way through, and all of a sudden it lights up one night. You can't plan for that stuff, right? So that's why we have insurance. Now, if something like that does happen, and I'm the landlord, is that a strike against me?
Unfortunately, it claims we would, if it was kind of the first claim, maybe lose a claims-free discount. But other than that, nothing really more would happen. And then if there was more claims throughout the coming years or in the policy term, then they might take underwriting action to increase the deductible or limit coverage or remove certain coverages. We had lots of people not get hail insurance for a few years after they had 2 or 3 hailstorms that came through Lacombe in early 2013 and 15. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see here. Christine, she says here, do you have a program that covers all of your properties corporately? Can you do that?
Yeah. So there's 2 different. There's commercial insurance and then there's personal insurance. So a personal insurance policy would be like the house you're in and you live in, right? And maybe you own 2 or 3 other properties that you rent out, and you're able to kind of bundle them all together on that one policy. Where you get into the commercial insurance is where you start owning them in a holding company or a company name, or you're over a certain limit where the insurance company says, okay, we can't insure these personally anymore. And it varies between each one, but usually it's around 5, sometimes it's 6, it might be 8, right? It depends, but there's a limit to the amount that they can insure. And then once you get to that limit, then we have to take your rentals and then put them on a commercial policy. And whether it's all on one, or we have different rentals of different types on different policies. So we might have all your houses on one, might have all the like apartment condos on another one, and it's just kind of how it plays out. But yeah, there's definitely ways to get multiple policies on one commercial policy.
Sure. All right, this question comes from Lori Sears, and she says, is it different insuring a rental house than a personal residence? sorry here, I'm losing my techie buddy here, and that's MacKenzie. So I click my screen and something's acting up here. We'll see what happens. So you go ahead and read the rest of that because I ended
Sure.
up putting something across my screen and I can't
Oh,
read it.
yeah,
Right
yeah, you bet. So is it different insuring a rental house than a personal residence? I've heard on the site that some landlords have been informed that rentals are not covered. And yes, that is true. If you have a primary home, and let's say you become an accidental landlord or you decide rent it out for a while, you have to advise your insurance company that you are in fact renting it out because it becomes a change in the risk. And so they want to either address that with either a different rate, different coverages, but you definitely need to advise them that you're renting it. Or if you have a rental and its primary purchase was a rental, then that one needs to be insured and advised that it's a rental from the start. But yeah, there definitely need to be advised of that for sure, because it could, you don't want to come down to a misrepresentation of what it is that the insurance company actually is insuring for you, even if it's
because
actually.
even if you accidentally or you misrepresent somehow, you can have your whole claim denied, right?
Yeah, and it's not that they look for things like that. Like, don't get me wrong, but they if say all of a sudden you're there's a coverage that they offer for primary all risk policies, but they don't offer it for broad form rental coverage policies, then it's possible they will deny it because they never would have insured it in the first place had they had the right coverage on the policy as a rental versus a primary.
Right, right. So always important to be upfront. You know what? For the sake of saving $50 or $100, you could be losing a
Yeah,
lot of money on your big three, four, $500,000 investment. So
yeah, for sure.
just to add into that about full disclosure, what happens if you end up having a tenant that starts having running the house as a day home?
Well, definitely need to have them stop running it as a deal. If they keep continuing, yeah, like you have to get them to have liability for the day home. Um, a tenant's policy can be extended to include a day home, but again, up to so many certain kids, right? And that usually includes your own. Um, so maybe you might be able to get 6 kids in total, and if you have two, that's 4 extra. And on again going from personal to commercial, so on the commercial side of things, we can insure day homes, private day homes that, as long as they keep to regulations, we're pretty much okay. So then we would have to give a copy. That's when the landlord would need a copy of their insurance to give to the landlord's insurance policy to make sure that they're covered as a day home, as a day home provider. But yeah, and then it's definitely increases the liability. That's for sure.
Okay, so here's a scenario that has come up on the page in the past, and that is uh, the landlord contacts their insurance company and says, "Hey, just letting you know that my renter's running a day home." Boom, they get a bill. It goes up. I don't know if I'm recalling it correctly, $1,000.
Hmm.
Is there some truth that can this happen?
Yeah, yeah, because there's more exposure, there's more risk to that location. So any type, not necessarily day home, but any type of at home business that has clients coming in. So masseuse, day home, hairdresser, um, those type of kind of personal services, right? If you were running like work at home for you know a I don't know, a government office that's just pushing paper, there's really no additional exposure to that. But if you're having people come in on a constant basis, then yeah, definitely it's a home-based business exposure and can increase the rates.
Right. So insurance companies set up their risk based on exposure, and your exposure can be once you've increased your volume of people accessing your house, other than the regular visitors that will be coming, which is calculated into the initial risk. So now you're running a home-based business where mom's coming in the morning to drop the two kids off, dad's coming in the afternoon or in the evening to pick up the two kids, and then the next day grandma might have to pick them up. So now you got 3 family members. So there's a total of five people now that are involved in accessing a property for 2 children. So that's where the risk is increased.
Yeah, and also like all the kids that are there too, right? Because if they get hurt, they would be eligible for compensation under both the landlord and the renter policy, or you know, a lack of a policy, then they could, you know, sue them for injuries, right? So
so there's no saving this. Is that as a landlord, if somebody says I'm going to run a day home, I'm like, no, you're not, because your rent's going to go up the $1,000 extra that I have to pay, just so you know. And you know, that's an expense to your business. But here's another thing: is that if I recall that that comment, and it goes back quite a ways. They told them they couldn't, and they got the day home stopped, but then the insurance company wouldn't switch it back. They wouldn't reduce it back down to the original. They kept it up. Does that sound right, or is that a little
odd? That does seem a little odd to me. Maybe, I couldn't really comment or speculate on why, because if they got rid of the risk and it was still rated as a rental, then they should take off that exposure, that surcharge. So that's why, having kind of the insurance service rep that you can go to and have those conversations with is you know, to have that in your back pocket's invaluable, right? So.
Right. All right, what else we got here for questions? Let's go back to the page here from today. Let's see. Lori Miller says we had no choice on who would insure our units. More than double this year. Is there a company that does insurance for mobile homes as well as stick homes? That's the question.
Yeah, so it would depend if they wanted them all on one policy or if they were okay splitting it up. We have some separate companies that will do mobile homes as rental homes. It's not our preferred way to do it, but if older mobiles aren't the easiest to insure, even as a primary home, so they come with restrictions and limitations of coverage. But if you're wanting it all on one policy and all on one package, then there could be again, just the limit to what the insurance company wants to do and provide. And if you're stuck on having it all in one policy, then you can't. It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah. No, right on. Let's go down to Christina. She says, Darren, I'm interested to talk to you. My properties are in Lethbridge. Can you help her out if she wants to talk to you?
Yeah, you bet. I can give the contact deals at the end or message on the page. For sure.
Yeah, you can reach Darren through the page. Just so everybody knows, Darren is hasn't really partnered with the page. However, Darren's a trusted member of the community, so that's why we bring him on. So if Darren can help you guys out, and I think you notice every once in a while he'll throw in his 2 cents on insurance, because sometimes the questions start running a little wild and a little astray, and you dial everybody back in. So I appreciate that, Darren.
That's right. And you don't have to, even if you just look at the policy and you just want to send me, hey, does this look right? Why do I have, you know, additional living expenses, or why do I have, you know, what is volunteer payments on my liability mean, right? Like any of those questions where you just, maybe it comes up, maybe it doesn't, but yeah, like it doesn't have to be, you know, can you sell me a policy? Like I'm not really here to do that. I'm just here to make sure that, you know, we get insurance knowledge out, and if you have questions, just feel free to ask.
Yeah, and that's what our page is. That's what our whole community
Yeah.
has been about. We're driving behind about education and getting the good stuff out there for everybody to run an effective business and feel safe about what you're doing. So Darren will certainly guide you. Like I said, Darren's not here to solicit your business. Darren's here to help us be educated when it comes to insurance companies. Because you know what, it's like buying a Ford or a Dodge or other. You're going to go
Yep.
or you're going to go where your car is the best price for you and where you're satisfied with the service you get. So let's see. I think this is Guidry. She says, uh, tenant insurance does tenant insurance have coverage for outside belongings, um, like radio, furniture, barbecue? Um, what if the belongings were damaged by hail or stolen? Does tenant insurance or
Yeah.
landlord insurance cover that?
So it all comes down to who is the owner of the property. So let's take the barbecue and the patio furniture, for example. If it's provided by the landlord, and then it becomes the landlord's responsibility and their landlord contents, right? So if it was damaged in a fire, in the hail, in the windstorm, then the landlord's policy would cover that. There would be a deductible, right? So depending on what the deductible is, 1,000, 2,500, it might not be worth putting in the claim unless it's with a bunch of other property, siding to the house, the roof, that kind of stuff. If the barbecue and the patio furniture was owned by the tenant, then it would be the tenant's policy that would cover for any damages. And again, they would have a deductible as well. So depending on what's damaged, the value, it would depend whether it's worth to put the claim in or not. Generally, it's on a replacement basis. So even if you have a 20-year-old barbecue, the insurance company is going to go out and buy a new one. Like similar, right? They're not going to get you the Broil King or a Traeger, right? But they'll get you one that's similar to what you had. So, yeah.
Right on, right on. Okay, let's go. Oh, Gidry's got another question here. She says the tenant had some guests at the property. One of the guests slipped and broke his leg. Who has to cover that? The tenant or the landlord insurance?
That's an interesting question, and that probably doesn't get solved until maybe it goes to the courts or into who's going to offer the settlement. But generally, it would be the tenant policy would be first because they're the one who invited the guests over. They're the one who's responsible to make sure the sidewalk's clean, the railings are in general good condition. There's no broken glass anywhere, right? Where the landlord would become responsible or partially is under, they have the Occupiers Act, and the Occupiers Act goes to who has ownership or use, or it's kind of like the ownership and use of the property. So because you're the owner, you are the one who's ultimately responsible for then having the tenant in there. But as long as the tenant had insurance and the damages were under what their limit was, if they had $1 million policy and they had $10,000 worth in injury, then there's going to be no responsibility on the landlord. But if they had no insurance, then it is possible through the Occupiers Act that the landlord could be responsible for the damages. So that's the long-winded way of saying, who knows?
All right, let me twist this up a little bit for you. So is it important then in a lease to identify who's responsible for cleaning walkways and maintaining yards? Is that important in a lease?
Definitely, yeah. Like as a landlord, you put as much on the tenant as you can. They're responsible for the yard, and they're responsible for the sidewalk, and mowing the lawn, and breaking up the leaves, and trying to keep the hazards and the nuisances down to a minimum. As much as we can. I know some condo units are going to say, okay, well, we do this, we do that, right? But as much as you can to put back to the tenant.
Right. So now you put it back and you say, okay, you're responsible for the walkways in and out of your unit or your residence or your side of the duplex. You're also responsible for your half of the sidewalk that runs in front of your portion. So if somebody slips on the sidewalk in the community, you want to have that written into the lease that's their responsibility.
And there should be a way to notify the landlord as well of an issue, right? Because let's take the sidewalk, for example, and it's concrete, right? So it's, you can brush the leaves off and hose it down, right? But let's say it starts to crack and there's a crack and a deterioration of the concrete. Well, that's generally not going to be the tenant's responsibility because it's not their sidewalk, right? So there needs to be a line of communication to say, if you notice any hazards that you can't fix or you're not really responsible for, that you have to let the landlord know within a certain amount of time or a reasonable amount of time so they can get remedied, right? Not that they have to get fixed that day or the next day, but in a lawsuit it's going to come down to what would a reasonable person do. So if it takes 6 weeks to get it fixed because you can't get a contractor, you can't get the concrete, then that's still a reasonable time frame. So if somebody slips and falls there, because we're still waiting for it to get repaired, but we've addressed it, maybe we put up, circled it or spray painted it, orange or whatever, and done a little bit of due diligence. And
So due diligence is in your contract as well, saying you're responsible to let me know if there's any deficiencies in anything or any dangers. Again, you're covered because they didn't let you know. Right? And if they do let you know, you darn well better write it down and keeping a little log of communications with the tenant of what they're telling you.
You can say, okay, we've got a contractor coming on Tuesday, let us, and then the contractor tell you, and then you can kind of maybe plan a time frame for when the repairs can get fixed. And
okay, what do we got here? We got another question. This one is from Trish Fraser. Now, Guidry and Trish are both they're admins for our page and help us out. And you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity to put a plug in for both Trish and Guidry. A lot of times you see MacKenzie and I as the face of the page, and but behind the page we have two ladies that work diligently in keeping things running for us. And I'm going right on record right now for MacKenzie and I is that we appreciate both of you ladies. And so they're both asking questions here right now. So here's the question. It says, would the tenant's insurance cover the damage they left behind when they moved out? So if a tenant has damaged something.
Sure. So unfortunately, this would be a no, because the premise behind insurance is you can't do anything willfully and cause damage for it to be covered. So I guess the description then of what damage is, right? So if it's just like a terrible condition and there's scratches in the walls and doors are kicked in, unfortunately, that's not what the tenant's policy is going to cover. And the landlord's policy may or may not cover, depending if they have a tenant's vandalism exclusion and what that looks like. Generally, the landlord policies have those written in, so it's just a matter of checking. Sometimes we can get with or without. So
cool. Yeah. So let's take that a little further. Tell us about tenant vandalism exclusion. So is that something you have to look for that's in the fine print of your policy? Is this a question you should be asking your agent?
It's definitely going to be in the fine print, and depending on who you get your insurance from, they may or may not have to advise you. If you get it from an insurance company that can only sell one type of product, then that's what they have, and they don't have any other options. Where if you go to a broker or another provider that can go through multiple insurance companies, then that's something that they should be telling you, is, or at least providing you in the quote summary, what the major exclusions are, and that would be one is the tenant vandalism, or how it applies, if it's double deductible, or if there's a certain like limit, like maybe there's only a $10,000 limit as opposed to a full policy limit, that kind of thing. So it's definitely something to look at right now. Like you should check it out just to see what the tenant vandalism exclusion is and if it's on your policy or not.
Okay, so I'm going to call you and I'm going to say, Dan, I got some houses to rent out. You know, it's not going to be part of the conversation, but this is knowledge that I'm getting now. I say, so what happens if my tenant vandalizes the place? And your answer to me will be what?
Well, yeah, I would just take a look at the policy, and then I say, well, if you've got this tenant vandalism exclusion, so unfortunately, there's no coverage. If the tenant causes a fire willfully, that's 99% covered, because the basis of insurance is fire insurance. It would be like if they pulled the copper wire, if they smashed all the doors, interior doors, windows, put a bunch of holes in the drywall. That's the type of tenant vandalism that's not covered. If that then subsequently creates a fire, then that would be covered.
Okay, so then I'd say to you, Darren, can you get me a policy that covers tenant vandalism? Do you have that available?
I would tell you I would do my best.
You have to go looking for that. It's not a normal request, I think.
It's not normal, or it's with if it's maybe with a company that is double the price, then again it goes back to what are you willing to take on as a risk versus what are you wanting to pay for the premium. Like if it's $1,200 right now and I can just say it's $4,000, that's a huge if you don't have tenants vandalism for 3 years, then you've saved yourself almost $9,000.
Right. Now I'll put a little plug in for one of our other trusted partners here is Single Key. And if you reach out to Biller, their program through Single Key, they do have a rent guarantee program where if a tenant does vandalize and destroy your place, they guarantee you some rent, and they'll pay up to a certain portion or a certain amount of money to get you back up and running and get some of that stuff fixed. So they do have that as part of the Single Keys package. So that's somewhere else you can look if an insurance agent such as Darren or somebody can't bring you what you're looking for. That's why we have these other people as part of our community. And you've seen Biller on our shows, and you've seen some of his comments. So they offer a product that's different than what Darren does, but they don't insure your home. They insure against vandalism, period. Right?
And they've seen a niche in the market that again the insurance companies have decided is too much for them to be on risk for. And it works for them, and it's a good secondary supplemental to have in your back pocket. So you can have that for whatever the cost is versus whatever I can get it for you, because I can't just get you that specific thing. I have to then package it with the whole entire new policy when whatever that price is, right?
Yep. All right, let's just flip back up through the questions here. And okay, Deidre, you repeated your questions here, so I was going to read some of yours, but let's see. Oh, here's one from Deidre under the questions. What if a tenant, when they left town for a weekend and the fridge stopped working and the food was spoiled? Who's responsible and who's going to cover? So the fridge that I supply as a landlord stopped working, or the freezer stopped working, and all the food is gone, it's spoiled. So what happens?
Just like on your primary homeowner's policy, a tenant's policy will have coverage for food spoilage, and as long as it's not like where they intentionally unplugged it, there is coverage there for the food in the freezer and the fridge. So
under a tenant's policy.
Yep.
Cool. You know what? Because I remember there was a question this week, and if anybody remembers seeing it, you might want to have that person come to our show, and whatever minute we are on the show, just make a note of it here. We should be about 45 minutes in. The tenant contacted the landlord and said, my food was damaged. It's about I think it was $300 worth of food. They wanted to be compensated. And as a landlord, correct me, Darren, if I'm saying this right, not saying this right, is the landlord should say, you have tenant insurance and you need to go to your insurance company and get them to compensate you. That's why you have tenant insurance. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if for whatever reason they decline the claim, because after an investigation they find out that, however, the freezer stopped working, whether it was unplugged or if it was left open, for example. But yeah, they should put the claim in for that food first with their policy. And generally, freezer food is not subject to a deductible. It's one of those kind of, there's 4 or 5 additional bonuses to the insurance policy, if you will, and freezer food is one of them. And generally, it doesn't even have the deductible.
So my fridge that I supplied stopped working for the tenant. That tenant should have the coverage for that. But will that insurance company come back to my insurance for the fridge to stop because my fridge failed?
They might, but I couldn't see that happening, just because the internal processing that it would take for the tenant's policy to do all that. It would be 400. Well, I'm just making up numbers, but it would be more than what the food would be worth to pay it out, and then have the administration costs to get that money back.
Right. The simple fact is,
if they can get a substantial amount back over what they're out.
Yeah. You know what? I guess if you just bought a half beef and your freezer was full and the freezer quit, well, okay, there's an issue there. But if it's your fridge that quit and you've lost, some meat, some bread, some ice cream, and a few other things that fit in the top of the freezer, plus some milk and a few other things, is there going to be a $300 to $400 bill worth of food to replace it? The insurance company hasn't got the time nor the effort they want to put in to go and try to collect $300 back from my insurance company. They just pay it, move on. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. That's generally. I mean, as a landlord, if you want to make that decision as a business case, they've been a tenant of mine for, I don't know, 20 years, 10 years, right? And haven't had any issues. Okay, well, maybe that's something you look at individually, right? But if it's, you wouldn't really have to, tell them to go to make the claim first. And then if they say no, get a copy of the denial letter, and then you have a discussion with your tenant after that.
Right. Yeah. And if there's a deductible, you as a landlord, and it's your fridge, maybe you'll pay for the deductible for the tenant or something like that. So try to find a way to make it easy. Let's see here. A question popped up, and it says, oh, no, that's a question we've already have. Oh, and the next one was a thank you. So that's good. So Darren, what have we missed here that you can think of that would be good things to chat about, to educate some of our landlords on? You think anything off the top of your head from questions you've solved?
Well, I think as far as just even looking at whether it's your primary house or your rental houses, you want to take a look at a few wordings, coverages, and policy policy types that they offer. So you want to look at all risk versus named perils. And all risk is going to be that we cover everything except the exclusions. And they list the exclusions, and sometimes you look and there are many, but anything else, if it's not a specific exclusion, is going to be covered. A named peril only has about, it depends on the company, but they only have between 8 to 13 things that they cover. And if it's not one of those, but they are big, right? We're talking fire, lightning, explosion, impact by aircraft, or land vehicle, hail, windstorm, water from a pipe burst, sewer backup is another thing we'll get into. But those are the different coverage wording types. So all risk and named perils. Then you want to look at your valuation. So whether it's replacement cost or actual cash value. And so replacement cost is it's going to replace your current house or rental. So let's say you have a 40-year-old house, but it's going to replace it with a new one. So they're going to use material that's of the same like, kind, and quality to rebuild your new house. If it's an actual cash value, they're going to take a look at what it was originally to build. Then they're going to depreciate it. You know, every year it goes down a percentage and give you that amount of money up to the maximum amount of your policy. So if it's an actual cash value, you don't need to insure it to as much because you're not going to get it replaced. So let's take a $400,000 house, right? $400,000 to replace it, but if it's say 30, 40 years old, it might only be worth say $200,000. So you only need to insure it to $200,000. But again, you're not getting that full replacement. And most mortgage companies, finance companies, to have a loan are going to want that replacement cost coverage. So those are the valuations that you want to look for. Then you want to look for wind and hail, because a lot of those will either have limitations or higher deductibles. Then sewer backup. And then now we have overland water coverage. So that's like what they call flood coverage. So that's the claims in Calgary from, I forget, 08, I believe. That kind of brought the change to the insurance policies throughout Canada, because flood never used to be covered in Canada. But after that, the insurance companies started putting in wordings for flood, and depending on where you are and how close you are to water, excuse me, I've had too much beer. It determines the amount of sewer backup and overland water coverage you can get. Sometimes you can get full limits to your house. Sometimes it's limited to $10,000. So you really have to pay attention to that one, because it doesn't take long to rebuild a basement and dry it out. If you limit to 10,000, you should look at increasing it, or knowing that, okay, this is all I got. So those are kind of the main coverage limit, or perils that have either exclusions or limitations to how much you're going to get paid out.
Right.
Yeah,
So
those are the
ones
ones you want to look at.
So the big changes came with those big floods when Calgary went underwater, basically, and
Yeah,
the next down the
that,
High River and all down through there. Yeah. That changed it for across Canada, pretty much, did it?
Yeah, I mean, it changed it. It made it better, right? I mean, the tragedy of it made coverage available to, I believe it's like 95 to 98% of all Canadians. So whether it's a limit or a full coverage, but at least there's something available there to you. And there are certain government programs that can be accessed for those, I guess, 5 to 2% that can't get it. But again, once you have a house that's accessed that program, no other owner or future owner can get paid out. I'm not very familiar with it, but it is out there.
Right.
As a
Well, listen, we'll start to wind it up here. So what my takeaway from tonight is simply this: it's important that I have insurance. I tell my insurance company that I have a renter, and that I full disclosure as to what's going on at my property. I have my tenant, and I want to make sure my tenant has insurance, and that I regularly check up to make sure that they have insurance in place. I want to have a lease that has things listed in it as to what responsibilities are: your sidewalks, your ice buildups, things like that. You as a land, it's their home. and you as a landlord, you are providing them a home. You're providing them a structure to live in that they're going to call home, and they're responsible to make sure that their home is safe. And you as a landlord, you'll want to document and be on top of them, saying, hey, you're not looking after these things, and document that you had that conversation. Because when someone's hurt and someone goes down, you want to make sure you're well documented as to, I told my tenant, I told them on this day. Is that fair enough about?
Yeah, that is a very good synopsis. You bet.
Yeah. So, you know what? I know we try to shortcut because some of us are accidental landlords. Some of us are in this as a business. And, you know, it's tough some days when you're having to subsidize your mortgage payment because of the way the economy is right now. But,
yeah,
you know what? I don't think insurance is something you can shortcut on. You may find something else that you can do that. But insurance is not the one because, you know, and I'll just say it in plain English, you're going to get bit in the ass on this one if you don't do it right. So sorry, MacKenzie has a little better way of saying it than I do, I'm sure, but that's the reality of it. And folks, you just got to make sure. So Darren, as we wind it up here, we like to talk to about what are some of your favorite things, contributions or that you like to make to a community or pet projects you have. Is there anything out there that Sims Insurance or yourself that is close to your heart that you'd like to acknowledge?
Oh, well, I'm an active member of the Kinsman Club. And if there's any other fellow kin or kinette on the call or the line, I'll say hi, and maybe we can see each other at the next districts or other function, curling maybe.
Great. Yeah. So look for Darren, look for that smiling face, and you can reach out to him and have a little further chat. Now, anybody else who wants to, I updated Darren's name on the screen there. So it's Darren King with Sims Insurance in Ponoka. I think I spelled Sims right there, did I? And,
one M, but that's okay.
One. Sorry about that. But yeah, folks, give Darren a call if you have some, or reach out to him on Messenger and have a chat with him. I know he's very active on Facebook there because he's quick to respond to stuff. And we very much appreciate you being on the show here tonight, Darren. Lots of great information. And I got the host tonight without MacKenzie here, and I struggled through it.
Yeah.
I think I pulled one out of my pocket here. So.
You did a great job, Chris. It was great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Well, just sit tight behind the scenes, and we will have a quick chat, and I will send everybody off with good night and good luck, and keep the conversation going on the page, people. It's great. We have a great learning environment, and I will put one little plug out there. I had a chat with Rob Bonin, and you know him on the page as affectionately as Rob Boak. And he had a great chat with the RTDRS, and fingers crossed, we're reaching out to them to join our show one night, and we're going to talk about how to present things and do things right from a landlording perspective and what helps you with your claim. That's one of our goals to get them on. Not sure when that show will happen, if it'll happen, but Rob's working behind the scenes for us. So everybody take care, and we'll see you again.